outcome of this trend is that many white heterosexual Christian men in the US, for instance, they tend to lean to the right or extreme right, not because they are racist sometimes, but because that's the only option they find. So this problem, I'm talking about this cultural war or this dichotomization between left and right. Firstly, we thought it doesn't concern Muslim till it came to Muslim circles, because the language, not only the language, but the concept, the categories, the ideologies, the worldview of all these so-called woke movement or so-called progressive left. First, it was out of Muslim circles, but finally, in Muslim circles, you find activists or speakers promoting this in the name of Islam. They said Islam comply with that, it's good for us, we have to be aware and we have to develop these ideas. So in the Muslim conferences and symposiums I observe, I could identify regular points coming back from different speakers and participants. Specific concepts, language, categories. For instance, patriarchy. Nobody defined patriarchy, but it became a problem in these circles. They say patriarchy is bad. We want gender equality. Sometimes it went very far away. The woman, Muslim woman said, why the woman wear hijab and the man doesn't wear hijab? The men also have to wear hijab because we want equality. Why the woman is not leading the salat in front of men? And so. Polygamy, why the woman cannot have husbands? You know, all these new ideas within Muslim circles. It became more or less widespread according to the Islamic groups, of course. Also, people claim that LGBT relations is halal. New interpretations that seems very weird, but that spread out in specific circles. Blaming so-called oppressors according to the ethnic background and gender. Very interesting. They look at people and they will decide which is to blame, who is to blame, and who is the victim. They say, oh, the way you look, you're oppressor, you should apologize. Because you're white, because you're a man. Sometimes even to black men, same thing. They say you should apologize because women are oppressed because of men, so you're a man, so you are part of the problem. You're white, you're part of the problem, so don't speak. That's behaviors you observe in many of these Muslim circles. Have quite plenty of examples here. We don't have time to go, but we can also share the PowerPoint later, inshallah. But broadly, it's these new consequences of the penetration of these postmodernist discourses in Muslim communities. So the main assumption you will find in these groups is that the world is separated between oppressors and oppressed people, groups, based on identity. So they speak about men versus women, white versus non-white, but then it goes to Arabs versus black people, and so division has no end. Division is the game of shaitan, according to the tradition, so there are more divisions every time. They speak about heterosexual versus homosexual. So even if you're a straight person, they say you're part of the problem because you're not, you are the side of the oppressor, you are the side of the privileged people. That's the vocabulary you find in these groups. The world is divided into identity groups competing for power. Dominant groups are seen as oppressors. No room for individuals because they reduce you to your identity. And the group's historic guilt is passed on to its descendants. What do you speak about? What do I speak about this? Because it's very interesting. In these Muslim circles, they pretend to comply with Islamic teachings when they say that. They say, we say that, but it's Islam, it's not me. You know, they mix both. They are doing something new, influenced by the postmodern ideologies in the name of Islam. So they say Islam wants social justice, white people are oppressors, so white people should be banned now from here. We don't like them because they are part of the oppressors. Islam doesn't like oppressors. That's the kind of ideas they spread out. So they say that you're male, you're part of the problem because so many women suffer because of that. You know, it's a simplification and reduction of the individual to his so-called groups. Very interesting. It goes very far away. Concretely, you know, you have people going to you and say, oh, you're from there, you're part of the problem. But they don't know your life, they don't know your history. Now for the last minutes, what's the reaction that we can develop? Or what is the insight, the light of Islam, the teachings of Islam about gender and race? Of course, we don't have time to go to many texts. But first we can remember that the dichotomous opposition between the far right and far left, which banish any nuance of analysis and which try to penetrate Muslim circles, Muslim communities. It doesn't come from Islamic worldview. It's not something Islamic. Because Islam, based on revelation, wahi, has its own interpretation, its own knowledge about these issues. For instance, one very powerful verse is in Surah Al-Hujurat, in which Allah said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa unsa wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'il lita'arafu. Humanity, indeed, we created you from a male and a female and made you into peoples and tribes so that you may get to know each other, or may get to know one another. Very powerful. But inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Where's the best? That doesn't depend on gender, doesn't depend on skin color, origins, nothing. Taqwa. So taqwa is the distinction between people, nothing else, in terms of value. And the purpose of diversity of people's nations is that we get to know each other, not compete to each other, not fighting each other, not hating each other, but the opposite. Same verse. We also have a hadith about ethnic relations that the Prophet ﷺ said in English, all mankind is from Adam salam and Eva, and Arab has no superiority over non-Arab, nor does a non-Arab have any superiority over an Arab, nor white over black, nor does a black over white, except by piety, the good action. Very powerful teachings for our Prophet that must be remembered. Then we have something about personal accountability in, I don't know how many verses, at least 2 verses, but I think maybe others, in which Allah said that no soul burdened with sin will bear the burden of another, meaning that we are responsible for our life, our action, not what the auntie did, not what the grandfather did, not what the ancestors did, just what we do ourselves, which totally contradicts this ideology that want to blame people because of the way they look or because of their gender. There is no such thing in Islam. Everybody is responsible of his act. We can't blame somebody based on the skin color or based on the fact he's a man or woman. We also have scholars, Muslim scholars, reacting to that, mostly in the US. One of them is Dr. Ali Attai, which said Islam is the last stand against woke liberalism. So he speaks about the same ideology. He speaks about the problem Muslims face in the West, because you try to educate your children in a good way, but he said when they go to public schools and colleges, they become exposed to this postmodern philosophy, critical theory, deconstructionism, atheistic materialism, post-structuralism, radical hermeneutics, etc., etc. All these influence, totally in contradiction with Islam. even totally in contradiction with Christianity. But Christianity, according to him and many analysts, lost the game. Christianity, no, it capitulated. It say, okay, we accept these ideas, no problem. Only Islam resists. The deceptive and irrational philosophy are making people miserable. Because at the end of the day, people suffer from that. Because according to this worldview, everything is a fight for identity, struggle for identity and power between groups, oppressed and oppressor. And the Sheikh had, ironically, those who are often labeled as oppressed, or actually the oppressors, and vice versa, meaning that sometimes they blame you, they say you're oppressed because you're a man, but the person who said that to you, she's a billionaire, she's a rich lady, she has power, with the money she can do many things, but she blame you because she think you are a problem because you're a man, you're supposed to be privileged. It's interesting, full of contradiction. Imam Zaid Shakir again is said blaming Muslims of America that follow this ideology. We adapt the language of the left, which is not the language of the scriptures. Meaning here we have to choose the worldview. Do we choose Islamic revelation principles, or do we choose postmodernist, Western American-based new understanding of life? It's totally two different systems. We start talking about patriarchal hegemony, white privilege, all these other terms that are not Quranic terminology. Because they are not Quranic terminology, we cannot carry the message of the Quran through this epistemology. Because the message of Quran is mercy. But the language of patriarchal hegemony, white privilege, what they always said, it's about hate, it's about division, it's not about mercy. It's even about hasad. Envy, meaning, oh, the other groups has more privilege than mine, so I will fight them, I don't like them. Quran teaches a total other message. For the last 2-3 minutes, I come to the conclusion. I hope this topic was quite clear because it's quite complex to summarize many influences in a few minutes or in an hour. But that's a problem that arose in many Muslim communities. First in the West, in which you find many people, mostly women, not only women, but mostly women, because they were somehow seduced by the narrative of gender equality, women's rights, social justice. So they were somehow open to these ideas and then influenced by these so-called scholars saying that Islam complies with that. Or they say that Islam has to comply with that. So now, in the West, wallahi, you can find a Muslim woman with abaya, with hijab. She prays 5 times a day. But she delivers a talk, she said to you, homosexual union is halal. Wallahi, you find people like that. And the problem is not for the people of my generation, it's for the younger people. They look at this, they said, oh yeah, they are Muslims, they deliver this message. It means it's something embedded in the Islamic tradition, and they try to change. They are doing PhD to try to demonstrate that it's okay in Islam. It's the reality of Islamic studies in quite many universities also. And if you tackle this subject, you may face quite a lot of animosity. The other problem we find with this is that although it claims to defend social justice, fighting against racism, it makes the situation of people worse. It opposed men to women. Why? Because it said to women that they don't need men, that men are the enemy, that they can be independent, and that marriage is not a suitable institution for them. That's the message. They say that they are to be stronger than men, independent. So that creates division in families, broken families, or inability for people to get married. But also, they fuel hatred between so-called race. We don't have race in Islam. It's all children of Adam alayhi salam. And we don't have race in science. because the difference between a black and white is not clear. You go from Europe to Africa, you will see the evolution of the bodies, but you cannot identify people as a race. It doesn't exist. It's an organization. جعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل. It's not خلقكم. Because the essence of the human is human. But now with this ideology, they try to say, you're white, you're Arab, you're black. And they say to the white people, oh, you should put your head down, you should be guilty to be white because of Adolf Hitler. Then they go to the black people, they say, look, the white, they rob you, they take everything in Africa, and you have to fight against them. Then they go to the Arabs, they speak badly about the Pakistanis. They go to the black, they speak badly about the Arabs. They say Arabs were slave masters, and so and so. It creates divisions. It's a big problem. That's why we talk about that. Because it's very deceptive by its nature. These people, they are called anti-racist. Imagine. They are called anti-racist activists. But many of them, when you listen to what they teach, it drives to racism. In Canada, they said to some people, Muslims, that are black skin, they say to them, you should open a black mosque just for the black, because the other people are not nice with you. You know, this ideology try to put people against groups, against women against men, and ethnic groups against each other. Jazakumullah khair, and forgive me if I did any mistake in my presentation. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.